President Trump approved military strikes against Iran last night and then changed his mind. This comes after Iran shot down an American drone earlier this week.
Tehran released these pictures appearing to show debris from the drone attack. Sources tell CBS News concern from U.S. allies was at least one factor in the president's decision to cancel the strikes. David Martin has the latest from the Pentagon.
The president had signed off on a strike against Iranian air defenses, but it was then called off just 1 hour before it was scheduled to launch. It was a go, one official said, and then it wasn't. Another said simply, cold feet. The stand down came 24 hours after this, an Iranian missile knocking an American drone out of the sky, sending it corkscrewing down into the ocean. The shootdown was celebrated on Iranian state television with a video purportedly showing the missile on its way to the target. But President Trump seemed inclined to write it off as just an accident.
I find it hard to believe it was intentional, if you want to know the truth. I think that it could have been somebody who was loose and stupid that did it.
That didn't sound right to CBS News analyst and retired Admiral Sandy Winnefeld.
I don't think it was a rogue attack. I think it was premeditated, and I do think it was a great mistake on Iran's part.
When asked about retaliatory strikes, the president was non-committal.
You'll find out. You'll find out.
But at an afternoon briefing, Democratic congressional leaders warned the president of the unintended consequences of even a limited strike.
The president may not intend to go to war here, but we're worried that he and the administration may bumble into a war.
The U.S. military spent much of the day declassifying intelligence to show the $110 million surveillance drone had not violated Iranian airspace, as Iran's foreign minister claimed it had. The U.S. called it an unprovoked attack, which raised the question, would the U.S. be seen as weak if it did not retaliate against an attack on one of its aircraft?
Administration is going to have to respond to this or lose a lot of credibility and standing in the region and around the rest of the world.
Republicans like Senator Lindsey Graham agree Iran cannot be allowed to attack a U.S. aircraft without paying a price. Secretary of State Pompeo is expected to visit Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to discuss what the U.S. should do next. Vlad, Anne-Marie.
All right, David, thank you. All right, let's turn now to Face the Nation moderator and senior foreign affairs correspondent, Margaret Brennan. She's joining us now from Washington. So, Margaret, at this point, what do we know about sort of the decision-making that first allowed the president to approve of these strikes and then call them off?
Well, we were positioned last night, the U.S. military, to carry out this limited strike on Iran. As David Martin has been reporting, it was literally within an hour of the strike. The president did have an 11th hour change of heart. Now, we don't know all the factors in terms of what was going on in his mind to back down from this, but one factor that is pointed to by multiple sources I've talked to is the fact that U.S. allies were staunchly opposed to military action and really want to see a diplomatic resolution to this. Now, when I say allies, I mean mainly those who are part of that international deal to keep Iran's nuclear program frozen, the European powers. Remember, Russia and China are also part of that deal. And all of those parties are trying to keep Iran from restarting its nuclear program, which it is threatened to do. And in fact, say that next Thursday, June 27th, Iran will reach a key level of stockpiled enriched uranium. So a strike would have made it more politically difficult for our allies to get Iran to back down.
So, Margaret, I guess another question that I think a lot of people are going to have when it comes to this decision-making process is, so the president decides that because of the pressure from the allies that perhaps this is not the best course. What are our allies saying about that in terms of the fact that the president has carried out airstrikes in the past? We've seen him take on Bashar al-Assad's regime when they attack civilians with chemical weapons. But in this case, no American lives have been lost. So I guess perhaps I'm trying to understand what the allies are suggesting, because there's been some reporting out there that Iran is using this as a tool to bring the United States into line, if you can somehow do that. I mean, we're a superpower and they are not, but.
Right. Well, there is concern among U.S. allies. Again, I don't know all the factors President Trump was weighing here, but allies and some of those military advisors to the president have cautioned that even if it is the kind of limited strike in Iran, similar to what you saw in Syria, that it could set off a chain of events that could eventually escalate into more of a regional conflict. Remember, with those strikes in Syria, there were U.S. allies by America's side, the French in particular, to say we're upholding an international principle, international law in terms of use of chemical weapons. In the case of Iran, there is still this dispute back and forth over exactly what happened with the drone. There is no questioning of the U.S. intelligence regarding what happened to those vessels and the mine attack there. All the U.S. allies have agreed that this was a pretty sloppy attempt to mine some commercial vessels carrying fuel. So what they see is a picture of a lot of misbehavior by Iran, a country that is increasingly desperate. And what the allies are arguing here is that, yes, the Trump administration has created a lot of pain for Iran in terms of adding more financial sanctions after it pulled out of the nuclear deal. But that has only made the country more dangerous and more desperate, and argue that this is in some ways Iran acting out of desperation. So they are pushing to have some diplomatic way out of this, not encouraging Iran to continue this, but instead to say, wait a second, there's a way we can negotiate.
You know, Margaret, we heard the president say that maybe the shooting down of the drone could have been something that happened, you know, by mistake. It wasn't intentional. And I'm wondering if this approving of the missile strike and then calling it off at the last second may also be a way for the administration to send a message to Iran to say, you know, we're ready, we're in position, we can do this at any time, just giving you fair warning.
Well, there's already a tremendous, significant, I should say, U.S. military presence in the region. The idea that walking up to the line and back will deter Iran, I think, is unclear because it seems to also fall in line with what Iran's top diplomat predicted to me when I sat down with him just a few months ago, which was he said he took President Trump at his word when he campaigned on ending costly wars and not wanting to create conflict, but that he worried that hawkish advisors were creating sort of the circumstances for conflict to arise, intentional or otherwise. So it's not clear to me that going up to the line and then backing down will discourage Iranian misbehavior. Perhaps it will signal a level of U.S. seriousness. But the only red line that President Trump that we know of has drawn that has been incredibly clearly articulated to Iran is that if there's any loss of U.S. life, it will force President Trump to carry out military action. All these aggressive things that have happened over the past few weeks are unhelpful, but they haven't crossed that red line just yet. So the president, you heard him yesterday in the Oval Office kind of musing out loud. You could hear sort of the lack of conviction in what he was saying here, where he said, you know, we can't stand for this, but at the same time, maybe it was just a mistake. He revealed very publicly that he had some misgivings about taking a very hard line in terms of how to respond here.
And yet, Margaret, let me ask the question that perhaps a lot of people will be wondering is the fact that the president hesitated, the fact that there was this last-minute reprieve, how does that play out across the rest of the world when they look at the United States and its convictions when it comes to situations that they feel threaten U.S. assets? In other words, the president, there was a shoot down of an American asset. The president is prepared to strike back, but then he calls it off. Is it seen as a peacemaking event, or is it seen as a sign of weakness?
It's seen as a lack of strategy, to be quite frank. That's what you hear from even America's closest allies and some of our adversaries, which is they see tactical moves, decisions being made in the moment, but not part of a broader strategy. That is what our closest allies are saying when they urge caution on this one decision of whether they carry out a strike or not is, okay, and then what? What happens next? The argument has been here that, yes, the nuclear deal that the world agreed to in 2015 was flawed. No, it didn't stop Iran from funding terrorism, nor was it meant to, but it kept a portion of the threat under some kind of wraps for a period of time. No one seems to be offering up a broad solution as to how to change Iran completely here. They're just sort of saying, let's contain the level of threat. And that's why they're really sort of trying to avoid any kind of direct confrontation. That no one really is offering a clear exit path at this point. We know the president has offered direct talks to Iran, that the supreme leader has said he would reject out of hand. Even Japan's prime minister delivered that letter that Secretary Pompeo wrote in the name of President Trump offering to begin talks. But Iran's position has been, we tried diplomacy, we did talk to you, we made an agreement, and until you rejoin that agreement, the nuclear accord, there's no use in talking.
All right, Margaret Brennan, thank you so much, Margaret. As always, we appreciate it.